Pharmacology, as a science, existed as far back as the early 19th century, but it wasn't until over 100 years later, following the end of World War II, that it exploded in popularity around the world, replacing snake oil and other dubious medicines with more synthetic processed drugs that have to go through efficacy trials to demonstrate their effectiveness and safety. One apparent miracle drug that emerged in the 1950s was the now infamous thalidomide. One of thalidomide's primary uses at the time was as an antiemetic, a drug to treat nausea, and as such, it was prescribed to expectant mothers experiencing all too common morning sickness. Unfortunately, the drug hadn't gone through safety trials nearly as rigorous as today's, and one massive side effect that went unnoticed until it was far too late was that it causes severe birth defects in the unborn. Subsequently, upwards of 20,000 babies were born around the world with such defects, oftentimes fatal, and many more pregnancies ended in miscarriage. Even though the US only had a confirmed 17 cases due to the FDA's refusal to greenlight thalidomide, this sparked the single greatest scandal in all of pharmacology in the Western world, leaving an increasingly medicated population to wonder if they had been a little too quick to put their trust in the pharmacist. Even today, with America's current HHS secretary on a crusade of his own about the prevalence of drugs and the possibility of unknown side effects involving the most vulnerable, that trust has never fully recovered, and every parent can relate, at least on some level, to the idea that maybe, just maybe, something monstrous is gestating.
The Davises are a normal, everyday, middle-class nuclear family living a perfectly ordinary suburban life. However, when Lenore Davis goes to welcome their second child into the world, the baby comes out not only kicking, but killing. With the newborn escaping into the city with a body count in its wake, Frank Davis, the father, vows to hunt down and end his mutated progeny, not knowing that the homicidal freak is on its way home.
It's wild that it's taken me almost 7 years to talk about him, but Larry G. Cohen was, in the 1960s, a television writer-director responsible for creating shows like The Defenders and The Invaders. Then, at the start of the 1970s, he branched out into filmmaking with low-budget pictures like Bone and blaxploitation movies like Black Caesar. One day, inspired by watching a baby having a violent temper tantrum in its crib, he wrote a spec script about a newborn with the physical capacity to do real harm. He took the script to Warner Brothers' head of production at the time, Richard Shepard, who, with one eye on the massive success of 1968's Rosemary's Baby, loved the idea and was willing to give Cohen a good amount of creative freedom due to the low budget, which would total a thrifty $500,000. This episode was voted on by my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to vote on future topics like this one, get early ad-free versions of my videos, or just wish to help keep this channel viable as YouTube ad revenue gets increasingly stingy and the copyright bots get increasingly hostile, please consider joining my Patreon or becoming a channel member. I'd like to give a special shout out to my $8 patrons: Batty Bat Firebrand, Chuck Poor, Diane McGill Davis, Don Quixote, Given Chumley DDF, Jack Blair, John Burrell, Mike O'Connor, Numinous 2019, Patrick Baker, Robert McGill, Sean Vale, Spodes, TB Schrammick, Tracy Rothmyers, and Warren Davis. Thank you so much for your support. Though Cohen had initially planned to cast Anthony Perkins and Janet Leigh as a kind of Psycho reunion, he instead turned to John P. Ryan to play the male lead, the father Frank Davis. Ryan had been a classmate of Cohen's at the City College of New York, and Cohen decided to cast him after seeing the actor in a Broadway production of Medea. As for the Davis matriarch, Lenore, she is played by Sharon Farrell, a veteran of television who had made a splash in films like A Lovely Way to Die and Marlowe. The ill-fated family friend Charlie is played by William Wellman Jr., the son of famous producer-director William A. Wellman. and the ad agency boss, Bob Clayton, is played by Guy Stockwell, brother to Al himself, Dean Stockwell. Other notable actors include Andrew Duggan as the professor, Robert Emhart as the sleazy big pharma exec, Larry Cohen regular James Dixon as Lieutenant Perkins, and Cohen's wife at the time, Janelle, as this secretary. Filming took place over 3 to 4 weeks in 1973, on location in the greater Los Angeles area, including in the LA storm drains and at a real hospital in Coldwater Canyon, where most of the medical staff are actual doctors and nurses, including this obstetrician in this real delivery room. The interior of the Davis home was filmed inside Larry Cohen's own home, and real off-duty police officers were also enlisted to save on the costs of renting costumes and police equipment. In addition to all of these cost-saving measures, the ever-economical Cohen filmed 2 movies at the same time: It's Alive during the weekdays, and, on weekends, Hell Up in Harlem, the sequel to Black Caesar. For the monster baby, Cohen turned to the great Rick Baker, who at the time was in his early 20s working on The Exorcist and at the start of his career, having not yet broken through to stardom with movies like King Kong and An American Werewolf in London. Cohen asked Baker to create something akin to 2001's Starchild, only with claws and fangs. During development, Cohen decided to only show fleeting glimpses of the creature, believing that less is more when it comes to scary monsters, a trick Steven Spielberg would accidentally stumble onto a few years later with Bruce the Shark in Jaws. Baker created an articulated armature for the actors to react to and an enlarged mask, suit, and gloves to be worn by an adult, specifically his girlfriend and future first wife, Elaine. While admittedly the effect isn't always the strongest, he and Cohen did try to put the suited version at high angles alongside oversized furniture to make it appear smaller. Many of the effects were done in Baker's own garage to save money. The sounds of the creature were done by taking real baby noises and playing them in reverse. While the POV shots used double exposure to mimic the inability of real-life newborns to focus their vision. One fun fact is that in the end, when Frank is carrying his baby out of the storm drains, he's actually carrying a Pekingese named Pooh, whose white fur and leg you can clearly see in this shot. For his coup de grace, Cohen managed to get the legendary Bernard Herrmann to do the music. Herrmann had no compunction against working on a low-budget movie like It's Alive, and his score is one of the few things critics, who didn't start to appreciate the movie until decades later, would applaud. Herrmann elevates the entire film, and his score would be posthumously repurposed for its sequels. When Larry Cohen delivered his cut of the film to Warner Brothers, Richard Shepard had departed for MGM, and so It's Alive lost its primary backer at the studio. The then heads of production didn't particularly like the movie and released it in April of 1974 in a single Chicago theater. A general but extremely limited release followed in October, with substandard marketing, relegating the movie mostly to the bottom of double and triple bills, where it made a little bit of money and ran non-stop for over 3 years. But it still wasn't enough to be considered a hit. However, overseas, It's Alive fared much better, earning the support of European critics, audiences, and filmmakers. In late 1976, after yet another management shakeup at Warner, Cohen, with the help of Arthur Manson, one of the executives behind 1971's Willard, hey, wait a minute. Well, which one is it? Which one should I watch alone and not watch alone? I don't know! Sorry. Lobbied the newest head of distribution and future CEO of Yahoo, Terry Semel, to watch the movie and consider another release. Semel saw its potential and ordered a test screening that went remarkably well. Then, in a nearly unprecedented move, he ordered a full re-release with a brand new marketing campaign, led by one of the simplest and most effective trailers ever made.
There's only one thing wrong with the Davis baby. It's alive. It's alive. Don't see it alone.
When It's Alive released, again in March of 1977, it raked in $7.1 million in theater rentals, equating to a raw box office total around $39 million. Larry Cohen used the money to buy a new house, invest in some real estate, and become, in his own words, independently wealthy. He went on to make 2 sequels, alongside some other films that I should probably talk about in the future, and he quickly became a well-respected filmmaker in his own right. It's Alive did get a direct-to-video remake in 2009, but that's probably best left in the bargain bin. For me, I find the original It's Alive to be a fascinating little picture that blends the gritty 60s and 70s horror aesthetic with the slasher sensibilities of the 1980s. While the underlying premise does strain credibility, to put it mildly, the film sells itself well in its hyper-realistic atmosphere, multi-dimensional characters, relevant themes, and earnest delivery. We open with a woman going into labor in a way that is very unusual for Hollywood, but familiar to anyone who's actually had a baby, in that it's understated, methodical, unsensationalized, and clinical, which helps to suture the audience to the real world. Then the movie throws the massive curveball audiences know is coming when we are shown the aftermath of the birth, a delivery room soaked in blood and dead bodies with a despondent, confused mother in the center of it, still strapped to her stirrups. We follow all this through the eyes of the father Frank, who loses his job at an ad agency because of his sudden infamy, and decides he has to kill the monstrosity that has threatened his family and community at large. Frank goes on an Ahab-like quest to prove that he is not to blame for the homicidal actions of his offspring. At one point, he even directly references the fact that people confuse Dr. Frankenstein with his creature. But then he discovers, once he corners and finally gets to see the thing, that he feels parental love all the same, in a powerful performance from actor John Ryan. So, while I won't blame anyone for looking at the plot and concluding it's just a schlock fest from beginning to end, It's Alive is a much better film than it appears to be at first glance. It's a harrowing emotional character study about parenthood, about family, and about unconditional love. And sure, it's also about thalidomide, a fact it doesn't even try to hide, but Cohen, in his audio commentary, says he wanted to also make a film about the so-called generation gap, the notion that modern youth is so alien to the generation that came before that parents feel an inability to connect with and even fear their own children. The movie is also incredibly well made from a technical standpoint, despite the shoestring budget, some borderline laughable effects, and a couple of less than stellar actors in supporting roles. Like Herman's incredible score, the movie is far more sophisticated than its contemporary critics would have you believe, and it served as a massive prelude to the likes of Halloween and A Nightmare on Elm Street, whole franchises that would go on to dominate the horror scene for a decade. Therefore, for all these reasons, I not only love the film, I firmly believe that It's Alive is a certified horror classic. And that's all for tonight, my dear mortals. Do you think we're too dependent on prescription medication? Let me know in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Thank you for watching, and until next time, when we'll tackle Cushing and Lee's third undead monster, this is the Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love, as long as you're not hurting anybody.
Doesn't everybody inquire about it nowadays? It's just a question of convenience, and we decided to have the baby.
We all make mistakes.